It says, terrorism, the act of protracted or spontaneous inflicting of systematic attacks and assaults and intrusions upon individuals and places within human populations with the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. Let me read it again, so there is no mistake. The act of spontaneous or protracted infliction of systematic attacks and assaults upon individuals and places within human populations with the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. Now let us examine the last 200 years. Before there was this so-called politicization of this terminology, because this terminology by the United Nations and the G8 countries, that is the countries that are the most developed nations in the world, they have politicized this terminology. They have politicized this definition. In the last 30 years, they have made a special definition for this. But let's go back 200 years and let us see. In the last 200 years, and I want you to add up the numbers as we move along, because those numbers at the end will tell you who have been guilty of terrorism in the last 200 years. The numbers I'm going to give you are the numbers of people that have been systematically slaughtered and destabilized, liquefied, or otherwise eliminated. Let's start out with the invasion of South America by the Portuguese and Spanish conquistadors. And in that incursion, which took place in the 18th century, they slaughtered systematically, destabilized, and otherwise eliminated 56 million people in South America in order to take control of that continent, and they are still holding that continent today. 56 million. How did they do it? Through the act of inflicting systematic attacks and assaults with their armies and their weapons upon individuals and places with human populations with the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. What is that definition? Terrorism. Let's talk about Christopher Columbus on behalf of his Spanish king, Ferdinand, and his French prostitute wife, Isabella. Christopher Columbus was given the crown jewels of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. They sold their crown jewels to some Jewish merchants who built the boats that Christopher Columbus took, headed towards what he called India. You know the story. And he was a fool. And those Jewish navigators who were on the boat with him, they knew that he was a fool. And they knew that once they got out on the ocean, they could not drink the ocean water But he was a fool. He didn't know that you could not drink the salt water. So those Jewish navigators, they took lemons and lime with them, which lemons and lime will deactivate the salt. So they used to drink it and desalinate the water. But they allowed Christopher Columbus and his crew to drink the water, and they caught something called rickets, and most of them died. So those Jewish navigators, they took him where they wanted to take him, which was what we call now the Americas. Because those Jewish navigators, that's where they wanted to go. Because they had the maps from the Muslims. So they knew where to go. Because they had lived with the Muslims in Spain for more than 600 years. And they knew how to sail the ocean. And they arrived at a place called the Americas. But Christopher Columbus, he survived. But the fool that he was, he still called the place India. And so even today, how arrogant they are, they still call the people in my country, the native people of my country, they still call them Indians. And let me tell you, after Christopher Columbus came back and claimed that land for King Ferdinand and Isabella, they sent more ships. And within 150 years, they destabilized, massacred, killed, liquidated, eliminated 89 million native Indians, as they called them, to take control of what they call the New World. So we got 56 and we got 89. You keep adding for me, please. And what did they do? They inflicted systematic attacks and assaults with their weapons and their ships and their boats and their armies upon individuals and places within human populations with the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. And what is that definition? Terrorism. Their definition. It's not Khalid's definition. It's their definition, which is in the Oxford Dictionary, the Webster Dictionary, the Funk and Wagner Dictionary, all established authorities in their language, their definition.